Good evening, everyone, and welcome to National COE's Privacy Engineering Workshop Series 1 on Privacy Risk Management, Intelligent Visualization, and Mitigation Technique. Today, we have Mr. Abhilash Soundararajan, who is CEO and founder of Priva Sapien, a NASCOM deep tech company and incubated at National COE DSCI. He is a privacy tech leader with 17 plus years of experience in cybersecurity. He has filed more than 30 patents in his career for various companies in the US and India in the area of privacy, blockchain, IoT, zero trust, and networking. Today, Mr. Abhilash will share key learnings and hands on experience on privacy risk assessment, privacy attacks, PET mitigation, and many more. Welcome, Mr. Abhilash.
Hi, Srishti. Um,
Hi, Abhilash.
yeah, thank you for having me here. Great. We have many people have joined.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So can we start?
Yes, Abhilash, over to you so you can start the session.
Thank you. Hey, thank you everyone for joining. This is Abhilash Soundararajan. I'm founder and CEO of Sapien. We are a pioneer in privacy enhancing technologies. And today we are really happy to present you the first one of the first workshops in the country on privacy enhancing technologies. On privacy engineering. So this is going to be a very interesting topic, and we are really overwhelmed with the number of participants who have registered for this session. So looking forward to a great interactive session. Feel free to put your questions on the chat. We will have Q&A at the end of each section, like, in 10-15 minutes, we will have Q&A as well. And then you can put your questions, somebody would read up, and then we would discuss the answers. Um, and the second part, we actually have a live demo, exclusive live demo for you of privacy enhancing technology. We would do a live demo of privacy X-ray. So it's going to be very exciting, very interesting. Looking forward to a very interactive session. And let's start. So I would share my screen, Srishti, and let me know once you're able to see my screen. And I would go to the presentation. So let me know you're able to see the screen, and then I'll start.
Yes, Abhilash, we are able to see.
Okay. So thank you everyone for joining this privacy engineering workshop. As mentioned, we are Privacy Sapien. I am Abhilash Soundararajan. I have around 17 years of experience in cybersecurity. I have worked with Silicon Valley companies, filed a bunch of patents. Then a couple of years back, we started this Privacy Sapien for privacy engineering, because this is a niche area which is coming without many solutions. It's a critical requirement with the regulatory ecosystem coming up across the globe. So we are incubated at DSCI, and we are a NASCOM deep tech company. We have won Atmanirbhar Bharat Challenge Award from Niti Aayog. We are working with companies both in India and companies, multinational companies with presence in India and other countries as well. So to start with, this is the agenda for today. We will have a quick introduction about both the presentation and also the audience and your requirements, what you had mentioned as your requirement in the registration. Then we will look into the technology trends, which once again was a key requirement in the survey, and how the technology is evolving. Privacy technologies are evolving in the space, followed by product introduction. The two cutting edge products that we have launched recently. One is Privacy X and one is Event Horizon. Then we will look into global privacy frameworks like NIST and Linden. I see that there is a lot of interest in this as well. Then this would be the ecosystem part of it. Then we will dive deep into the product part. We will dive deep into PET, how PET works in terms of risk visualization and risk privacy risk mitigation. So we have built a cutting edge privacy framework called Pixar, and we would introduce that, followed by the intelligent offering that we have, which is Privacy X-ray, which provides data protection impact assessment, intelligent data protection impact assessment, followed by privacy by design, how it can be accelerated using PET technologies. Then we will have a live demo of Privacy X-ray. We would take different data sets, try to understand different levels of risk involved in the data set in the live demo, and then we can open up for question and answers. This is what we are going to do for the next 2 hours, and this is very extensive session. So I request you to keep the session as interactive as possible. We will try to pause at times and take your questions whenever time permits. Okay. Keep putting your comments on the chat. Keep the engagement on, and then looking forward to a great session. Okay. Introduction. Privacy technologies are today very, very important because human thoughts, emotions, buying behavior, daily lifestyle, our networks, life, travel, even voting is being manipulated by our own data, and algorithms running on the data use the data to predict and influence and even push us in a specific direction. For example, polarization of the society, even that is possible. Election results can be changed. Lot can be done with personal data. It is so much so that algorithms with enough of your personal data can predict you better than what you know yourself about. So that's the challenge that we have. So privacy is not just a compliance check mark anymore. It is basically fundamental for Homo sapiens to retain human consciousness the way we know it. So this is very, very fundamental. And if we don't protect our data today, then we are going to be slaves of algorithms in the future. Hence, it is very important that we protect our data. So if you look at 1990s to 2000, it was sort of beta stage of the internet. 2000 to 2010, where devices and infrastructure came up. Last decade was the cloud and AI era. This era is going to be data and privacy era. Hence, privacy technology is very fundamental for all organizations. So if data is the new oil, internet is the new oil field, privacy technologies are the new refineries, and AI systems are the new engines. And today we are completely missing this privacy technology layer. And that's what Priva Sapien is building for businesses of the future. So we have filed around 9 patents. 2 of them are already granted. We are a Niti Aayog recognized Atmanirbhar Bharat Challenge Award winner. We are a NASCOM deep tech company. We are working with global and government organizations, global system integrators, consulting firms, policy think tanks. We are sort of a pioneer in this field. We have built products which can significantly accelerate your privacy journey, your organization's privacy journey. And the products that we are building, because they are pet-based products, these are compliant with global requirements. And once again, we have seen that many of you have mentioned that um, you need to take care of global requirements which are different in every country. So how do you take care of it? So pet technologies can be a great solution there, and that can meet a lot of requirements. um, so the use cases are a plethora across ecosystems. Given that we saw a lot of people from BFSA space, there are use cases in BFSA. For example, you want to do data collaboration, for example, loan data collaboration, purchase data, transactional data collaboration, advertisement, fraud analytics, payroll data collaboration, wealth management, insurance. So today nobody is an island. Everybody is interconnected with the ecosystem, especially with data. And ecosystems like finance, where open financing, open banking, and now open financing is emerging. Data collaboration is very, very critical for building right services for right customers, and personalization is the key today. So this is going to be very, very vital. And you take other on the other side, if you look at an ecosystem like healthcare, um, National Digital Health Mission architecture speaks about anonymization, privacy operation center as some of the core requirements in the ecosystem. So privacy is becoming critical in national level ecosystems, and so is the importance at company level. Either it is national or international organizations, for all of them privacy tech is becoming very, very vital today. um, so let's quickly look into the audience requirements before we get into the deep dive section of the technology and solution. So when we look at the survey, we had around 130 140 registrations, which is very, very significant. We were expecting like 40 50, but this was like almost 3 times or more than that. So really thankful for the level of interest that you have shown. We see that almost 39-40 percentage of the respondents were from a security background. Some of them were CISOs, some of them from senior security portions of the organization. 8 percentage were DPOs or people who are related with privacy. 6 percentage were CIOs. 17 percentage were consultants, because privacy is a complaints related segment. We see great interest from the consultant community. 6 percentage were auditors. 6 percentage were from academic institution. We could even see someone from MIT. And then almost 20 percentage were fragmented into multiple other segments. So that's the context of people who have registered and probably joined as well. What is very very interesting to see is that, and this is something that customers wanted to understand as well, that what is happening in the ecosystem. That was a very important question coming again and again in the survey. So this, we are happy to share our learnings from the survey, where 38.5 percentage, almost 40 percentage, have mentioned that they are just starting the privacy journey, which is very very vital, very very interesting, because this is the right time to start. um, then 14 percentage are waiting for privacy regulations to come. 11 percentage have already invested in privacy compliance software. And it was, what was very surprising was 5 percentage is already using privacy engineering software, which is very very encouraging. So this is the split. um, so many of you have already started the privacy journey. Majority have already started the journey, but you would require tools and technologies to enable you to accelerate your privacy journey. That's what coming up from the second question. Some of the main pain points that we see in organizations privacy journey from this 150 people is, the biggest challenge is awareness within the teams, within the ecosystem, which is a major challenge because privacy is a very very niche field. So 38 percentage have mentioned that awareness is the primary challenge. Then we have also seen that 10 percentage have mentioned that privacy preservation and data loss solutions are not easily available, which is a challenge. Similarly, data protection impact assessment solution are not very easy to use, very manual, very troublesome. And 14 percentage have mentioned that. 21 percentage have very interestingly mentioned that global policies, every country has its own set of privacy regulations, and how do we operate for global clients? How do we operate? It's a big problem. Then workforce constraints. Privacy teams work under very minimal budgets, and workforce is a major constraint. So with all this cutting edge technology coming up, with high requirement for knowledge, with very less workforce, it is really really killing. That's a signal which is also coming up. And data privacy by design is a very big challenge. So how do design data flows by with privacy by design, by default in place? It's very easy to say, but how do you implement? It's all in English, but how do you actually translate it into a technology and use it on a day-to-day basis? So this is what is coming up, which is very very stark, really very very thankful for the respondents. Then uh, for the question, what the people think would accelerate the company's privacy journey, education came up with 20 percentage. 30 percentage is automating policies and regulatory compliances, which was very very significant. Then privacy preservation and control has come up with 17.5 percentage. Privacy engineering, which is I'm very happy to see that, which is like almost 22.5 percentage. And then tools, which are overlapping with some of the other areas, which is around 10 percentage. So it clearly shows that there is a significant need for technology, significant need for automation, where privacy enhancing technologies would work, and people have even directly told privacy engineering is something which is of importance to them, which is very heartening to see. And when we asked what is one thing that what you want to learn from the workshop, 23 percentage had mentioned pet, which is which makes me very very happy. And 24 percentage wants to know about privacy trends and privacy practices. What are other people in the industry doing, and how is this ecosystem maturing? 30 percentage have told that privacy risk management and mitigation and automation of it is something they want to learn about. Privacy journey, how do you design your privacy journey? What are the privacy frameworks available which you can incorporate? And given that there are a lot of people from security background, you want to connect and continue the zero trust story into the privacy story. And these are the really valuable insights that we got. We could understand the pulse of the audience, and we have designed the whole presentation based on this. Hopefully, we hope that this would be very useful. So let's get into the meat of the discussion. Emerging privacy global regulations. So privacy regulations are emerging across the globe. If you look at it, EU was the flag bearer. They started with GDPR. Now they have added SEC standard contractual clauses, and now they are also building on top of it European Data Governance Act for opening non-personal data. India has, 2018 published the draft data protection bill. 2020, and once again, JPC presented the data protection bill. Now we have a very clear picture of what is coming up. There are minor tweaks which government is working on, and we hope that this will come soon, as Minister said, by the monsoon session. And India is also very keenly working on non-personal data, which should leapfrog India almost to the same level of European regulation, which is very, very interesting. US, they already have CCPA in place, and CRPA is already published, and it is going to be enforced from January 2023. So there is a huge market opening up there. And if you have presence in California and other areas, then other states are also passing regulations. So it's going to be very interesting for you. So coming to the regulatory perspective, given that the JPC is stable, it is time now for organizations to begin their privacy journey, because designing the privacy journey is very complex. You have a lot of legacy applications, a lot of data already present, new applications being built, everything getting digitalized. So there is a lot of challenge to make the new applications be privacy compliant, and also onboard the older applications and mature them into privacy compliance. And then the time available, which is just 2 years, is simply very less for organizations. So it makes sense for organizations to start now, which a lot of you are already started doing, which is coming up from the survey. So the things that an organization has to do is to identify different kinds of data flow in the ecosystem, work with the stakeholders, for example, product teams, marketing teams, advertisement teams, multiple other teams, understand, balance between privacy and utility, then set the governance policies of how this needs to be addressed, come up with a phased deployment proposal, then come up with technologies and solutions that can meet your control and protection of privacy data, then do your initial level audit, register with the data protection authority, start mitigating the privacy risk, and iterate. So this is significant. This would take significant time in organizations. There are multiple steps involved. Hence, it is recommended that organizations start now with their privacy journey. It's really high time. Um, so what is bare minimum? Typically, this is a question that you may get asked typically, especially in a developing country like India, where what is a bare minimum requirement that somebody has to meet if they want to start their privacy journey? So the current data protection bill, chapter 10, speaks about two types of penalties. One is a type 1 penalty, where you need to make the basic requirements. For example, you have to do data protection impact assessment, you have to do a data audit, then you have to register the data protection authority, uh, put necessary protections in place. If you fail to do any of these, then once the enforcement of the regulation comes in, the organization which fails to do this can be penalized 5 crores or 2% of their global revenue, whichever is the highest. And similarly, if there is a data breach or a violation, or children's data getting violated, safeguards not adhered to, then the penalty can be 15 crores or up to 4% of organizations' worldwide revenue. So these are the minimum things that an organization has to do to ensure that they are compliant, right? And this is exactly what we are trying to meet with our privacy enhancing technology products. So government came up with some of the current challenges, which came up with a recent India open data ecosystem draft. And some of the key points which are mentioned in that as key challenges for the ecosystem is non-availability of risk management tools and anonymization, which is a key requirement. And they have referred it to multiple other regulatory requirements across the globe. And this is exactly what we are trying to solve. So if you look at it, what we are building is compliant with or provide solutions to regulations across the globe. For example, GDPR and SEC, India's draft data protection bill, CPRA, UK's GDPR, and Japan's APPI. So if you look at privacy journey of an organization has to first start with a data protection impact assessment and privacy risk assessment. So we have built privacy X-ray, which can significantly accelerate almost 4000x your DPIA and risk assessment journey, completely automate the process. And Event Horizon, which can help increase the utility of data, at the same time make data anonymized, which can enable you to share data with multiple parties in the ecosystem. And when you are actually doing cross-border transfers or sharing data with multiple downstream parties, you need to ensure that you have necessary privacy safeguards in place as required by the regulation. So the safeguards are not just technical, not just security based safeguards as we used to in the past, like DLP. It needs to be at the data level as well. So techniques like anonymization can help you get there. So those are the products that we have. So before getting on to the next section, I would like to quickly pause and see if there are any questions. Srishti? Um, we have two questions. One by Aparna. Is privacy by design and privacy by default the same? Um, Very interesting question. There are two different aspects. When you design something and you when you design something, it becomes uh, the default. So there are a couple of aspects here. One is process wise design, one is pet based design. So when you actually do pet based design, privacy enhancing technology based design, both of them become the same. When you are doing process based designs, it can be proactive and reactive. These can be divided into four different types. We will see that in the subsequent stage when we are looking at it in bit more detail. I'll come back to it. So NIST defines the privacy maturity of organization to four stages. Now, some can be by design, but by default, if you are secure, you need to have a slightly um, more robust systems in place. So we will look into those in the subsequent slides when we are covering that. And then there is another question on by Srinivas. Um, I think it is worth mentioning IT Act and IT rules in the absence of data protection. Well, currently there are offline. Yeah, sure. So that's certainly there. Given that this is more focused on what is coming up and people are getting ready for that, we're just covering that. But we, as you rightly mentioned, we have India's IT Act in place, which covers a lot of these things, but at a very very high level. Still, we have challenges in taking responsibility for things like data breach, where it is very difficult to have a watertight regulatory requirement. So these bills become very mandatory, and this once the bills come in, it becomes much more clearer for us to understand what you should um, do in terms of data protection impact assessment. Such clear structures are not present today. And what is penalizable and what is not penalizable, those things are not available. So once the regulation comes, it will become much more clearer. What are the chances of getting data privacy bill in the monsoon session? Yeah, this is we don't know. The probability is high, as minister says. So let's quickly get into the next section: privacy enhancing technology. So privacy enhancing technology is a very very interesting area. This is a futuristic area. um, Gartner says that privacy enhancing technology is one of the top strategic technologies for this year and for this decade, right? Um, so, privacy enhancing computation is when you can process the data without violating the privacy of users. So, when you look at protecting data, there are three different aspects. So, when you differentiate between security and privacy, this is a very important difference. um, Security is that which helps protect your data at rest and at transit. privacy enhancing technologies or privacy helps protect your data while it is in compute. So that's the fundamental difference between both. Let me give an example. For example, encryption helps protect your data only till the time it is encrypted. When you decrypt the data and give it to somebody, you have no control on how he can use the data. So you can restrict control till the time somebody has access. But once somebody has access, you have no control on how he can use the data. Probably he can take another copy of the data, or he can even take screenshot of the data, or he can do other things with the data, which is beyond what is consented for what he can do, right? So if you can privacy preserve the data, so even if this data goes to somebody, he will not be able to do something more than what he is supposed to do. For example, anonymization. So even if the data goes to the other party, and even if it is decrypted, because you have to decrypt the data to analyze the data, right? There are some exceptions, we'll come to that. But once you decrypt the data, the security part is over. Now, how do you control that he does not abuse the data? He does not run analytics to re-identify people. He does not link the data with other data sets and re-identify people and things like those, right? So that's where privacy enhancing technology and privacy engineering comes in. It's a very, very interesting a research oriented area. We have filed around 9 patents in this, and there are different aspects to this. We'll look at it. So let's look at the evolution of privacy. Um, so what is privacy? So today we are getting into privacy 3.0. So what is privacy 1.0? Privacy 1.0 is traditional privacy technology tools like tokenization, masking, etc., which results in huge amount of data loss, but at the same time does not guarantee much of privacy for users. So it's something very, very basic that we do. Then privacy 2.0 are more of privacy compliance software technologies, or privacy, probably you can say privacy template as a service, where it is still a human effort or manual effort, where you do a data protection impact assessment and then capture your thoughts and understandings and whatever you think is correct into a template in a software. That's primarily 2.0. And then there are some very basic classification software, for example, which classifies only PIIs. Um, so those are the initial those are the privacy 2.0 technologies or products. Privacy 3.0 is privacy enhancing technologies and intelligent risk assessment. So which is where we are getting into, right? So let's look into a very interesting um, privacy enhancing technology matrix, which will give a holistic perspective of different kinds of privacy enhancing technologies. Now, this is a very, very interesting area, and many of these technologies are in its infancy. We have to always look at it with an understanding of how mature is the technology. Um, so the x-axis, before even getting to the technologies, the x-axis is, the left side is input privacy and the right side is output privacy. Input privacy is typically cryptographic in nature, and output privacy is more statistical in nature. The top half is applications where you need to share information or give information in higher volumes, which is non-interactive in nature. For example, you have to give data to your analytics platform. High volume transaction, non-interactive, you are giving it to them, right? And the lower half is interactive querying, where you do API based query to understand, for example, Arogya Setu app, where you try to understand how many people are in 1 kilometer radius with who are COVID positive, right? Which is interactive, which is more for a B2C consumption kind of thing, more than for a big data platform. So we primarily focus in this area, where big data is a key requirement. Data collaboration between internal teams and external teams is a key requirement. And how do you do that in a privacy protected way is what we are focusing on. And we have filed bunch of patents working on multiple technologies, like anonymity, T closeness, differential privacy, and whole host of other patented technologies. And we have built this um, suite of products in this space. So the other areas are differential privacy querying, uh, privacy preserved machine learning. These are PPML is in its infancy. Technologies like federated learning. Then on the cryptographic side, you have things like confidential compute, fully homomorphic encryption, secure multi-party compute. These have, each of them comes with their own set of challenges. The applications are very, very limited. For example, fully homomorphic encryption has just come up. um, there are very limited kind of applications that you can do on top of it. For example, basic addition you can do on numbers. you know you can't do things like subtraction or division, but you can do addition or multiplication, things like that. A lot of constraint in a very, very fundamental way. Then the cryptographic sharing is, technologies like blockchain verifiable claims, non-interactive zero knowledge proofs, zk snarks, etc. So that's a very quick uh, peek into privacy enhancing technologies. Any questions? Do you feel, I think there is a question from Prabhu Saumitran. Hi, Prabhu. Do you feel human involvement should be minimal for privacy protection to achieve its intended goals? If so, what should organizations do in labor intensive industry? Very good question. The, there is understanding of privacy technology is very minimal. So that's where the awareness is very, very minimal. So for organizations, the more it is automated, the better it is, and hence privacy enhancing technologies are very, very important. So if organizations can reduce the amount of human influence, because it brings in its own set of things like human biases, mistakes, non-repeatability, and things like those, we will see some of the challenges. But that's very, very important. So hence the human involvement should be made minimal, as minimal as possible. um, and hence we would recommend, organizations which are labor intensive, or organizations which create a lot of data. For example, insurance, banking, healthcare. um, when the data is very near real time and it needs to flow near real time to create value for businesses, they should completely create automated privacy protected data pipelines, so that data can flow and can create values. For example, um, you know uh, near real time loan allocation, for example 1 minute loans, which is coming up in the BFSI space. Those absolutely require minimal human intervention with a lot of privacy and AI based solutions. We have another question from Aparna. Do PPML mechanisms vary by geography? Are there any laws which address this? So this is a very emerging area, and there is a lot to discuss in this. At this point, there are no clear thoughts on this. But PPML, by even the very definition of it, for example, Google, Apple are already using PPML to some extent. Um, so if the analytics happens locally and only the insights flow, even that can create some violation. So it's not a very clear um, solution yet, but even with PPML there can be a lot of corner cases which can be of concerns. Right, let's move on to the next section. So this one is about our products, Privacy X-ray and Event Horizon. So these are cutting edge research products in the market. um, there are there are not many solutions, especially in privacy. From a privacy X-ray perspective, there are not many solutions close to it, even globally. So what we do in privacy X-ray is we automate the risk assessment product process. So in the security world, for example, if you today you can do a security risk assessment or a pen test with automated tools. So do you have something like that for privacy, is the question, and that is being answered by Privacy X-ray. So it's first of its kind product globally, and we are building it ground up, being in compliance with global regulatory requirements like NIST, Linden, or regulatory requirements like GDPR, CPRA, Data Protection Bill, which can do multiple things. It involves significant components of AI and our own in-house privacy algorithms which we have developed. So it can help organizations visualize the privacy risk. That's what we do in Privacy X-ray. And in Event Horizon, uh, we offer peg-based anonymization as a service um, in India for the first time. And we do mathematical proofs. We provide mathematical proofs along with anonymization so that the DPOs and the business owners can cross verify and retain these proofs for audits and other purposes when they are doing data collaboration. And Event Horizon is an award-winning product. Event Horizon won Niti Aayog's Atmanirbhar Bharat Challenge Award for privacy-preserved healthcare data collaboration. So we used a patent technology in this called differentially private generalization. We have filed 9 patents till now, and one of our technical advisors is a professor in Indian Institute of Science, and we are working closely with multiple regulatory bodies, multiple data collaboration ecosystems, which is very very exciting. So quickly, let's look how you can use it in your organization, right? So typically, can you probably type what kind of industry that you want to hear an example of? For example, finance, healthcare, insurance, um, what kind of industry that you are in, so that I can provide some examples. Yeah, blockchain is an application. I am asking about industry vertical. For example, it can be finance or it can be healthcare, insurance, something like that. Yeah, thank you. Information technology, finance, BPO, e-commerce. Great, great use cases. E-commerce twice. So probably let's take e-commerce. So e-commerce is a really interesting area, especially now with the open network, where government wants to build an open network for e-commerce players so that they can get more data, and getting more data will enable businesses to understand, um, design their supply chain better, what kind of people are requiring what kind of FMCG products, where they need to store what kind of product, where you need to locate their delivery personnel. These are differences between success and failure for a e-commerce company. And for this, you require a lot of data. And where do you get this data? People won't share this data because this data is sensitive. So this is where privacy enhancing technologies can come in and help. Let us say you are a downstream e-commerce company and you are trying to get data from a FMCG uh, company, right? Now, when FMCG or an existing e-commerce company wants to share data, or even government wants to share data, this data can have privacy sensitive information. Like, this has information about who is buying what, which is very very sensitive, and people don't want this to be disclosed. So when you share this data in the traditional way, just remove the PIIs and share the data, different kinds of attacks can be launched, and we have a separate section to understand attacks. But just to give an example, in the state of Massachusetts, what happened was they removed all the PIIs, and it had just date of birth, age, gender, and location information, and then published the data set. What an attacker did was take voter ID dataset, map it, and re-identify almost 80% of the people in the dataset, right? Because the combination of date of birth, gender, location, pin code can be unique in a lot of scenarios. And then they could re-identify even the mayor who published the datasets. They got his health records and then couriered it to him. So that's the level of impact that you can have when you are sharing the data, and this can completely stop all the data flow if even one such incident occurs, right? So hence, we have privacy regulations coming in, which prevents the data, ensure that the data flow is privacy preserved, or the necessary safeguard measures are in place. So the typical way this would happen once the regulation is in, or even as a good practice many organizations are following now, is that the team which is sharing the data needs to check with the DPO if they can share this data with the external team. For example, Marico wants to share data with e-commerce platform. Now the Marico DPO would run this data against Privacy X-ray, see what is the level of risk. If Privacy X-ray says that the risk, privacy risk Privacy X-ray runs this data against different kinds of privacy attacks and identifies a unified privacy risk score, which significantly reduces the amount of human errors which can be generated. Exactly the question that Prabhu had asked earlier. So it can reduce the human error, make it repeatable, make it auditable, and make it a much more reliant and robust system. And these kind of calculations humans cannot just do in their own hands and minds or on paper, right? So this cannot be done manually. It requires software and services to do it, and we are doing the first of its kind product for this called Privacy X-ray. So we have come up with a new standard or new framework called Pixar, where we give a unified privacy risk score for a given data set. So if the risk is very high for a given context of collaboration, the TPO can say that the risk is very high. So these are the potential mitigatory steps. Even that is captured in Privacy X-ray. So once that's done, now, as you have seen in the survey earlier, awareness levels are also very, very less within organizations. So organizations uh, have very limited understanding of how they can mitigate the risk. So we provide mitigation recommendations as well, which can directly connect to privacy by default principles, privacy by design, privacy by default principles. So when you do privacy preservation, for example, you can use Event Horizon to anonymize the data and then now run it through DPO. Now DPO runs it to Privacy X-ray, and then he finds that the risk of the data set is significantly reduced from 85, it has come to 15, which is within the acceptable limits for the organization to collaborate. So now he says it's 15, great job, you can go ahead and share data with similar privacy risk with the downstream party. Now, let us say Marico goes and shares this data with the e-commerce platform, and now everybody, value is created for everybody. Marico can sell more products through the supply chain, to the channel, and the channel can effectively use the supply chain to create value for its customers in a more efficient way with this data. So this is the power of it, and this is, this is the parallel applications you can see across the ecosystem, right? Now, what are the value propositions? um, so this significantly reduces the time to do data protection impact assessment. For example, typically a data protection impact assessment at the minimum takes 2 weeks to few months, based on our interactions with some consulting firms, which is predominantly, that is 100% manual today. We can completely automate it, and we can do that in less than 5 minutes. In fact, that's the demo that we are going to see. This is a disruptive technology in the space, and this can significantly accelerate the unlocking of data near real time with multiple parties in the ecosystem, right? So this can almost 4000x increase your ability to do data collaboration, create value from data. Second is building governance process. Since it is metric based, and you have a single number based on which you can build your governance policies, this can significantly once again reduce decision making, consulting within stakeholders, consensus on the protection technologies which need to be put in place. This can significantly reduce the time, governance decisions time that is taken in data collaboration. Third is control. Based on the risk identified, we also make pet technology based recommendations of what technology can be used in a given level of risk for a given data collaboration. For example, anonymization when in a given context, if you can share data with downstream parties. Similarly, communication. The downstream party who is receiving the data needs to understand the level of sensitivity of the data, needs to understand the risk of the data. So once you have a risk score and you say that, hey, this data has 100% risk, and these are the penalties which can come in, and these are the ways you have to safeguard, he becomes much more aware in handling the data better, rather than just throwing the data to the other side. Similarly, protection, we make protection recommendations as well based on the risk score. One of the very interesting things which has come up is transfer of data, uh, which is cross-border transfer. For example, the EU-US privacy shield issue which is going on. Similarly, India also wants, every country today wants to have sovereignty over the data, so that um, other countries don't spy on the data or abuse the data or multiple other things. They have control over the data. So cross-border transfer has become a challenge, but the businesses are impacted on the other side, because majority of businesses are global by nature, and data flow is also global by nature. So if you say that data cannot flow from one country to another country, it becomes a very big hassle. for businesses to do businesses in the global world. So how to mitigate it? How do you ensure that these frictions are reduced? We make recommendations as well on that in the privacy X-ray itself. So this you can consider as a significant consulting effort, few months or even year consulting effort we do using privacy enhancing technologies and provide a far superior um, output to you to build and accelerate your privacy journey significantly, right? So these are different stages in your journey as well. Um, so this is very very important. Then context aware anonymization. So if you have PII, quasi identifier and statistical data in any data set, PII is sensitive. So if you are sharing data, even you may be the only person in your apartment with a specific car model and a specific age, right? So even if you remove any other information, just with these information you could be re-identified. So that's the challenge with sharing data. So we have built cutting edge privacy technologies which can help address these issues. One of the patents that we have done is differentially private aggregation, which can provide protection against such kind of attacks. And we also provide mathematical proofs which you can use in addressing these concerns. Right, this is one more example that we saw earlier. We spoke about e-commerce ecosystem. This is a healthcare ecosystem where you can share data with pharma companies, AI companies, insurance companies, supply chain, and even for internal storage, which has restrictions if the data is sensitive, and share privacy preserved data with multiple parties. So this is anonymization. So with that, I would pause, see if there are any questions, and also there is a very important poll um, which would help you accelerate your privacy journey. So I would request the team to put in the poll so that people can take it. In the meanwhile, I'll just see if there are any questions. There is one question: privacy X-ray as a service. Is it hosted? Are they local to country instances where certain countries have data localization requirements? Yes, absolutely. These are local to the country, and this is a SaaS service, and yeah, you can use it local to the country. Yeah. Okay. Um, Audience, you have a poll right now. We will continue the question and answer shortly. Request you to please take the poll which is currently in the chat. Please take the poll. This will help us connect with you, continue our discussion once the workshop is done. So please fill the poll. We will continue the discussion post the poll. We have a 3-minute break for the poll. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for those who have filled the poll. Thank you so much. Request the others also to please fill the poll because this is very very important, um, and it'll help both of us connect and help accelerate your privacy journey. We can also provide you some trainings. We have some exciting offers on privacy tech on this coming up. So please fill the poll and also let us know when we can start. Yeah, in the meanwhile, probably I'll take Aparna's question. Um, hope audience are able to hear me. Aparna, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um, okay. How do we preserve data privacy in applications like blockchain, where even the location of data may not be known? See, blockchain, it depends on what you are committing and what are you consenting. So there are a lot of layer 2 applications which are coming, and especially zero knowledge proof is one of the ways where you can protect data on blockchain. So technologies like multi-party compute and zero knowledge proof are areas where or areas which are currently under research, which can protect your privacy in blockchain. And it is not only about storing and you know decentralized nature. What is very important is what is getting stored and is that information sensitive. You cannot just store a transactional information, for example, who is transacting what, um, or location of transaction information on a blockchain as such, um, because this would be there forever. So you have to be very very cognizant of what information would go onto the blockchain and what would be stored on chain and what would be off chain. So that design is very very important. And in that design you can use technologies like zero knowledge proof, things like multi-party compute. Hope that answers the question. Yeah, Shiva has a question. From a privacy engineering standpoint, what do you feel are the gaps that you have seen in current and past experiences? Privacy engineering by itself is a very new area. Um, Not many solutions in the country or across the globe, very few. So this is an emerging space. So we are starting from zero. There is no past reference as such. Very limited. As I told, privacy 1.0, 2.0. For example, HIPAA, right? HIPAA requires that you privacy preserve the data through some very traditional methods. For example, masking. Now, masking results in huge amount of data loss. For example, your GPA, your PIN code, right? You cannot have any location information as per HIPAA requirements. Even PIN code, you can have only the first 3 digits, which is like only state level information, right? Which is nearly useless for for example, things like blood donation and vaccination, location of vaccination, things like those. So these don't work anymore. The traditional privacy engineering, or whatever is called privacy products earlier, like masking or tokenization, don't work anymore. We require new generation technologies to meet it, and that's the primary gap. That's why we have privacy 3.0. Hope that answers the question. Okay, so let's go back. Before sharing, let me see how many people have responded. Uh, okay, so it would be great if we can have few more responses, but let's quickly get on to the next part of the session. So global privacy frameworks. Let's quickly go through this. So NIST, which is US based National Institute of Standards and Technology, um, defines the difference between privacy engineering and security, which is very important to understand. We had a similar question earlier. So as you would know from people from security background, The security triad is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Similarly, privacy engineering objectives or the triad is, as per NIST, is predictability, manageability, and disassociability. Now, predictability is to understand, what kind of risks and reliable assumptions you can make in terms of data and re-identification, right? Manageability is, given level of risk in the data, how can you collect, alter, delete, and disclose data in a manageable way. And dissociation is basically ensure that the data is not associated to individuals when you are sharing data, right? Techniques like anonymization, or you want to do confidential compute, where you don't see the individual's data assets, but you just your compute will happen on the data, things like those. So predictability, manageability, and disassociability are the key attributes of privacy engineering solutions. So every journey has, privacy framework, and journey, especially the NIST framework, has 5 key steps. And as we saw earlier in the value proposition of privacy X-ray, you have first stage, which is identification, where you do a risk assessment, you understand the business environment, you understand the data flow, the nature, context of flow of data. Second is governance, where you understand and put in place policies, process, and procedures for governing the privacy of the data. Then you build a risk management strategy on top of the risk assessment that you have done. Then do a awareness and training for your internal organization and also external organizations who are receiving your data. um, Share information and share your policies so that they are aware, because they are also touching and processing your data. Similarly, control, which includes dissociation, communication, communicate your policies, process, and procedures, and protect your data wherever it goes. And that's why privacy preservation becomes very, very important. This is the NIST framework, and these 5 components are very important in your privacy journey. So, I think somebody asked about the maturity and, especially privacy by default and design. So you can have different shades of privacy, right? You can have partial privacy, where it is ad hoc to start with. Organization don't have personnel, or workforce is highly limited, no training, limited awareness, limited understanding of process and system. They still have privacy practices in place, but how is it effectively implemented is questionable. So this is called tier 1 level of maturity in privacy. They have just started, they don't have much of process in place. This is as per the NIST framework, which is a much robust definition, I would say, which gives much more clarity. Then risk informed are organizations who have approval based mechanism, but this is not organization wide. They have risk assessment process, but it is not repeatable. They have no formal consistent action on risk, and they have a workforce which have specific, partial time they spend on privacy initiatives, not full time. So this is sort of risk informed kind of a ecosystem. Tier 3 privacy ecosystems are ones where you have formally approved regulated processes in place. You have regular communication happening with the entire team. They get trained on a periodic basis. These are dedicated privacy personnel, and they are aware of the ecosystem and the risk which are evolving when you are sharing data. The most mature, which you get with privacy enhancing technologies, which is both by design and by default, is it helps adapting to the requirements, because by default, the data, when you share the data, becomes privacy compliant, which is not possible in other cases. So privacy risk management needs to become part of ingrained part of culture, which is very, very important. People have to take proactive measures. Privacy should not be reactive, because once the data leaves your organization, it leaves your organization. You can not control it. So it's very, very important that You do proactive privacy protection, and workforce needs to have exposure to cutting edge technologies and understanding of cutting edge technologies. This should be a very mature ecosystem which meets both requirements of privacy by design and default. Right? Then, so this is NIST, which is world's first, or one of the most looked up privacy framework which has come. Next is world's first privacy threat modeling framework called Linden. It's a European-based framework. We are interacting with some of their researchers as well. So, uh, why do you require a privacy threat model framework? The reason is that when there is a data flow, unless you know the threat of the flow, you cannot recommend the mitigatory steps, you cannot take decision making, you cannot do risk based prioritization, you cannot choose appropriate privacy enhancing technology solutions. Hence a threat model has been designed, and this is one of the popular ones, and this is first of its kind globally, and it's very popular. So when you have a data flow, as we saw in the other diagram, where a product team comes and says that this data needs to be shared with Marico comes and says that this data needs to be shared with the e-commerce platform. This is a data flow. When the data flow is defined, then you have to identify the different kinds of threats, identify different kinds of misuses which can happen because of the threat, then do a risk based prioritization, which risk is of higher importance and how do you solve it. Then understand privacy requirements deeper, because when you say that we cannot share this data downstream, they will say that this is what business requires. So understand the requirements more, and then recommend corresponding privacy enhancing solutions. Right? Map the pet technologies to the objective. That way you can accelerate the privacy journey. So this is what is recommended by Linden, and we are building this directly into privacy X-ray. Right? I'll just see there are any questions, because next section we will go deep dive into privacy X-ray. We look at Pixar, and then understand more about a single unified privacy risk. Looks like we are covered with all the questions till now. So let's look at Pixar. So Pixar is the first of its kind unified privacy risk score invented by Sapien. This incorporates, as we saw, NIST framework, Linden framework, and hence it is compliant completely with global privacy regulations. The framework empowers you to build solutions and organizations' policies directly on top of the risk score without any confusion and ambiguity in the ecosystem. It is repeatable, auditable, and it provides a very strong foundation for your organization's privacy journey. Right? Let's look into how we do it. So we start with attribute auto classification. So once you have a data set, we look at PII, quasi identifier, and statistical data. We try to understand and do using AI, we try to classify them correctly. And once we identify these, and then put them into corresponding attributes, we provide that information. And then based on this initial classification, then we do different kinds of privacy attacks on the data, or simulate different attacks on the data, to understand what are the different kinds and different priorities of risks which comes with the given set of data, which is first of its kind globally. And then we create a unified privacy X-ray assessed risk score, Pixar score, uh, which can significantly accelerate in taking decisions. And based on this, we create a likelihood versus severity matrix, which is very common in every risk-based framework. Right? What is the likelihood of the risk to happen, and what kind of severities can happen out of that likelihood of risk? right? So we try to understand this with uh, different kinds of privacy risks which are emerging, and we build a privacy versus likelihood versus severity matrix for you. And once this is done, based on the risk score, we make pet technology based safeguards that you can implement as a recommendation, and then key compliance requirements, for example GDPR or CPRA or India's data protection bill. What are the clauses mapped against a given level of risk, and what are the clauses that you should be cognizant of and meet those requirements, right? We mentioned those, and if there is cross border transfer involved, then make we also make corresponding recommendations for cross border transfer. This is very very extensive. We are going to do something live right now to understand how this works, but these are the primary things that we do as part of privacy x-ray, right? Are there, if you have any questions, feel free to post a question here. So once the issues are identified, or the levels of risk are identified, then we make recommendations for governance, control, communication, protection, and collaboration. For example, what kind of governance policies or awareness and trainings may be suitable in a given scenario, or what kind of protection technologies needs to be in place, what kind of privacy policies needs to be communicated, um, in terms of control. For example, what is the level of consent given, and for a given level of consent, what kind of protection that you need to have for a given level of risk. So we provide these information as part of the report. So as the report, in the report, what we provide in privacy x-ray is very high level score, a single score for privacy x-ray. Then followed by the score, we also provide different attributes which have been identified. For example, in a given data set, Aadhaar has been identified as PII, mobile number as PII, customer ID as PII, because these are directly unique to an individual. So these have been identified as PII. Then branch, year of birth, transaction date timestamp, zip code, IFSC code. These have been identified as quasi identifiers for the data set, which are not which are not uniquely identifiable. For example, year of birth, that person may not be the only person to be born in that year. There may be multiple other people, but this is a very strategic information, and the same information about the same person would be available in multiple other places. And if it is connected with zip code, there is a probability of re-identification of this person which can significantly increase. So hence these are considered as quasi identifiers. And others, for example status, currency, etc., are considered as statistical data which are in deep green. uh, so so thus we provide a high level perspective on the risk involved in the data, then we dive deep and then try to understand higher levels of risk within the data using multiple other techniques which we'll see shortly. Right, one of the advantages of having such a risk score is that you can build categories and you can accelerate your performance of your risk and privacy and security team, because it can just become a if condition for them, saying that if the score is like 100, then it is this, then it is category 5 data, and then don't give the data at all to anybody. If the score is from 80 to 99, it is category 4 data, and this data should not leave the premise of our data center, and people can use the data within the data center. 50 to 79, category 3, and category 3 data should not leave enterprise people, should not go to external parties. 20 to 49 probably can go to external parties. Category 1, which is 1 to 19, can be considered probably as anonymous data, so it can move to partners and partner ecosystems. So that way you can clearly create a very scalable, robust, repeatable privacy policy for your organization, right? This becomes very very important. Then Once this is clearly identified, a lot of privacy regulatory requirements, for example, data subject rights requirements, can be directly mapped to the score. And if you consider that a specific score beyond a point is more personal, lesser non personal, then in your policy you can mention that any data set with more than the score, let us say more than 20, should be considered as personal data. Hence, people's consent directly get applied to the data, which can significantly reduce the amount of uncertainty in policy within your organization or within your ecosystem. Similarly, what kind of protection and task the data protection officer has to do, what kind of compliance monitoring he has to do, all this can be captured, which can be related to the risk score which has been identified. Similarly, non data breach notification typically apply to personal data. It does not apply to non-personal data. So when the risk score is less than 20, for example, category 1 data, even if there is data breach, you may not be, held responsible for that. So organizations in the future may typically have two types of data sets: personal data sets and non-personal data sets, where non-personal data sets can get easier access within an organization, but getting access to personal data is going to be very, very difficult. And then of course you can connect penalty clauses to it, and then you can say that because we have automated penalty visualization within ecosystems, and then hence compliance is increasing. So these are very, very important. So I would like to just pause there and see if there are any questions. Okay, quick question. um, have any of you done a data protection impact assessment already, or you are planning to do one? Okay, let's continue the discussion. And if anybody, if you want to share something, you can put your comments on the chat here, and then we will get back to you um, for a discussion. Sudhanshu has a comment. uh, so does so you are saying, Sudhanshu, that you have done data protection impact assessment? Great. So uh, so that's really helpful. So do you see that this automated process with privacy x-ray, we will do a live demo as well now. Do you see that this can significantly accelerate, and how much time did the complete data protection impact assessment take for you? So probably he's okay, great. So we can this can be done in 2 working days. It depends, of course, it depends on the type of assessment. So we can significantly accelerate this. Probably this is something that we can discuss as well. So that's very interesting, and thank you for sharing, Sudhanshu. Okay, so let's look at different kinds of privacy attacks. So the kind of impact assessment and privacy risk assessment that we are doing is uh, really, really significant, which requires different kinds of specific kinds of tools. We look take into consideration different kinds of privacy attacks. For example, singling out attack, linkage attack, inference attack are three fundamental privacy attacks mentioned by GDPR. There is a working party which is associated with GDPR called Article 29 Working Party, and they have explained these attacks in detail, and sort of it sort of gets a regulatory kind of label. So understanding these risks and attacks become very important in data collaboration. There are other kinds of attacks as well. For example, background knowledge attack, collective privacy attack, which are new kinds of attacks which can be done on data to get more information and create new kinds of values for hackers. So when you look at the top three kind of attacks, which is singling out attack, which we discussed about, if the attributes, though if you don't have PIIs, even just the quasi identifiers and statistical data can be aggregated to uniquely identify an individual in a data set, then it becomes a singling out attack. Linkage attack is if two different data sets have common columns. You basing using those common columns, you connect those data sets and re-identify individuals. For example, in case of Massachusetts, we saw that healthcare data was integrated with voter ID data and linked with voter ID data, and linkage attack was done on users, and a lot of people were re-identified, right? Similarly, inference data. Let us say you know all cancer patients in an in an area or locality, or all who have taken a test in a day, and if all of them have, everybody who has taken test has cancer, and you know that some of your friend has taken the test that day, you can infer that your friend has cancer. That is inference attack. So it is very much like a background knowledge attack, where based on your background knowledge you try to infer information from published dataset or shared dataset which is available to you. Without the information which is available, it may not be possible to re-identify an individual, but with the information it becomes much easier for you to re-identify. This is called as inference attack. So these attacks are very important to understand to do a proper risk assessment, and these are not possible to be done manually because it is very complicated to do. uh, so that's what we do in privacy x-ray. So if, for example, let's say, one of the states published in the first wave of COVID, published exact location information of individuals, right? GPS coordinates. So you can directly identify their houses even if the names and other information are not there. Once their location is identified, you can just take their location without even going to the place. You can know the address of the house, and then you can go to voter ID dataset, and with that address re-identify that individual and launch an attack on, let us say, you know um, a social media attack, or um, you can do try to reach out to that person saying that, hey, probably you had COVID, we offer this medicine, and then he would be shocked that how you would know. But a lot of these things are possible, and a lot of these things are happening as well as we speak today. A lot of the calls that you are receiving, uh, such linkages are happening in the background, and you are receiving unsequestered calls. So one of the cities published hundreds of such records, and they could be easily identified, but later they corrected and removed um, all those records from their website. So why de-identification is not sufficient anymore? We'll speak about singling out attack. For example, in a singling out attack, let us say you have de-identified the data. It does not have PII, quasi PII information. But even if you can single out an 18-year female who is in a specific zip code who is COVID positive, and she can be singled out in a data set, then you can use the quasi identifiers. Let us say these are the quasi identifiers, and then try to re-identify in a specific locality who with specific attributes are there, and from that you can learn what comorbidities she has, which is very sensitive in nature, right? She may have some diseases, which is a social stigma. Her marriage may be at stake if this information gets out, or there can be a lot of other repercussions. Employability may be a challenge, things like those. So it's very important that the data shared is protected from different kinds of attacks which are possible. Inference attack, as I told you earlier, if you know that okay, somebody has taken a test um, and everybody's test result has come positive, you know that the person that you know who took the test is COVID positive, right? This can be for multiple other sensitive information, right? Any other health diseases or financial transactions or business partnerships which are very sensitive and things like those, right? Collective privacy or homogeneity attack is that the attacker is not actually worried about whom he is attacking, but any target is good for the attacker. So he sees that okay, a bunch of people have a specific attribute, and if he can even identify one person um, or reach out to even one of them, then he would be able to create a lot of malicious value for himself. So that is which is illegal. So that is collective privacy attack, right? I would like to pause there and see if there are any questions on the attack. This is a very deep topic, very complex topic as well. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Yeah, font size, I don't know for which slide. uh, Probably this slide is it's okay. Probably I think she was referring to this slide. This was intentionally kept small so that these information are not seen. Others I think are okay. Any other questions on the attack, privacy attack? Okay, if there are no questions, let's quickly move on. Then we have limited time for the demo. So intelligent data protection impact assessment. Data protection impact assessment is built on top of risk assessment. Um, so in a privacy risk assessment, data protection impact assessment, the why part, which is very important, is the privacy harm. What privacy harm can result to the data subject is a very important question to ask to start any data protection impact assessment or risk assessment. So Article 35 speaks about what of the GDPR, why we need to have a data protection impact assessment, uh, you know, and then Article 36 speaks about when you should do a data protection impact assessment, which is before you touch the data. There is no point doing a data protection impact assessment after you are processing the data. Even before you start processing the data, you have to do data protection impact assessment. Right? And data protection impact assessment is an important responsibility of a DPO. It is not necessary that the DPO himself has to do. He can outsource it. He can use a tool and do a data protection impact assessment. But it is primary responsibility of the DPO to ensure that data protection impact assessment is done before unlocking data in the ecosystem. And data fiduciaries, whoever is the owner of the data, whoever is collecting data from the customer, is primarily responsible for protecting the data. And then there are multiple tasks for the DPO which are listed as part of Article 39 GDPR. There are similar requirements for India's data protection bill as well. So DPOs can look at it, and what we do in Privacy X-ray can free DPO or empower DPOs in significantly accelerating their data protection impact assessment completion process. So this applies also for consultants. This can significantly reduce the amount of workload that consultants have, significantly reduce the amount of time taken, turnaround time, and thus it can be very, very beneficial for consulting organizations as well. Then, what are the different components of data protection impact assessment? Um, First, organizations have to define, or the DPO has to define the processing operation. what kind of processing is it, what is the objective of this operation, who would be receiving this data, what analytics will be run on top of it, information like that. Then there is something which is defined in GDPR, which is necessity versus proportionality. What is the necessity of sharing this data, what is the risk present in this data, and what is the proportionality um, of risk you want to take in specific business context for data collaboration. So these two are pretty much business defined. So the DPO can take care of these parts along with the business unit, and then the remaining parts, can be augmented through privacy X-ray, where assessing the different kinds of risks and freedom from a data subject, recommending necessary safeguards, security mechanisms for the ecosystem. These can be automated with, privacy X-ray. So with India's data protection bill, there are two process-oriented requirements and three technical requirements. Two process-oriented mandatory requirements with type 1 penalty are, organizations must appoint a data protection officer once the bill is passed. They will give a specific amount of time. Within that, you have to appoint a DPO, and organizations have to register with the data protection authority within a given period of time. These are process-oriented, right? Solution-oriented, data protection impact assessment, data audit, and safeguards need to be put in place by the organizations. So we help automating data protection impact assessment and building certain kinds of technology safeguards for data collaboration. So once the purpose of processing, kind of processing, and nature of data is identified, the risk assessment happens. Then based on the risk assessment, you can manage or govern the process, minimize the risk, mitigate risks, and you can put in place methods through which the data collaboration can take place. So this is very important in data protection impact assessment. So once we have the risk assessment done, based on the risk as a core, as we had earlier, category 1 risk, category 2 risk, etc., like cyclomic storm categorization, you can categorize the risk, and based on the level of risk, you can mention what level of mitigation and protection needs to be in place for downstream data collaboration, right? This is data protection impact assessment. Are there any questions? Else we can move to the next section, which is last section before we get on to the demo. Okay, so let's get on to the next section, which is privacy by design and default. And it's not just traditional privacy by design and default. This is advanced adaptive privacy by design and default, which enables organizations to be proactive in their privacy design. So applications, when it is created today, they have a specific data flow. How do you ensure that at every point data has maximum compliance across the flow? That is very, very important. So for example, if organizations have data pipelines, for example, privacy X-ray, uh, the data can come in, the risk can be visualized, and based on the level of risk, it can be connected to the data pipeline so that the data can flow into the anonymization service, where the data can be anonymized, and once again the data can be sent to risk assessment to ensure that the data is anonymized, and once it is correct, then the data can flow downstream for value creation. For example, let us say a hospital is unlocking its data and then giving its data to a pharma company. So when a hospital just directly gives the data, it can run privacy X-ray, understand the risk, then mitigate the risk with event horizon, then once again use privacy X-ray to visualize the mitigated risk, and if it is within the acceptable levels, then share the data from downstream collaboration and value creation. All right, so there are applications. So this would ensure that the data flow which is happening across the organization is privacy protected, and thus you can unlock the data for your business, create new streams of revenue for your business, at the same time ensure that you are not violating privacy requirements with the business. And the applications are nearly across multiple industries. For example, we spoke about healthcare, BFSI, telco. Uh, would somebody want to speak about any specific use case for privacy risk assessment in any specific industry vertical? Yeah, couple of questions. Trustee, we are working. We are in the process of doing it. What happens to um, there is a question from Prabhu. What happens to data privacy when flow happens from a company which uses pet technology to other companies which does not have um, such framework or solution? Interesting question. So it's a very important and interesting question. So we are speaking about the data processor and the data controller. So the pet technologies you need to apply only in one place, either um, at the data processor or at the data controller. Typically, it is done at the data controller, which is the source, and data processor is downstream. So just the company which is publishing data needs to do privacy preservation. So once it is done, the downstream organization can receive the data without any privacy compliance overhead. Especially, let us say, an industry like insurance, which Shiva is asking a question about. Both questions we can in fact connect, which is a good synergy between both questions. Let us say a hospital is sharing data with an insurance company for predicting premiums, right? So when they share this data is very risky. So which is very sensitive, and if this data just goes anywhere without privacy preservation, people can try to re-identify the individuals and can know individuals health records, which is very risky and which should not happen. It will be considered as a data breach and a violation of fundamental right of an individual. So the healthcare organization typically has to do privacy preservation, for example anonymization, and then anonymize the data. Once they anonymize the data, this data can flow to downstream organization like insurance, which can use the data and build different kinds of underwriting models on top of this data that they receive. And this can significantly accelerate and data much cleaner, much higher quality data may be available for insurance AI models, which can provide much higher accuracy underwriting recommendations to people in the ecosystem. Right? Great questions. Thank you. So this is applicable in other areas as well. For example, edtech, especially where children's data is in place, and children's data is considered very very sensitive. It can be useful. Similarly, IoT, everything is becoming IoTized today. We have multiple compute devices at home. They are always collecting information about us. So applying privacy technologies there become very very important, right? So we have come to the interesting part of the demo. So let's quickly go to the demo and then see, let's put a live data and then see what the risk score comes up uh, for it, right? So this is the UI of the product, right? It's very simple for somebody to just put in information. Let us say there are people from banking and finance and insurance background. So let's put a CASA data set, right? CASA workshop test one. So all you have to do, we have tried to ensure that we keep the complexity as much as possible on our side, and from the user side it is just you put the data and then you get the results. It's so simple. um, so that's how we have designed the solution. So all you have to do is just put the data set. We will see what this data set is, but all you have to do is just put the data set. That's it. So once you put the data set, you would automatically receive an email stating that um, you have we have started a process for privacy risk assessment for a specific data set, right? So assessment upload complete, right? We have just received an email. See one more email. So this is what we have sent, right? 0 minutes ago. Um, CASA workshop test one, right? Let me just delete the other sample emails. So the process has started the backend. So if we just have a look at the backend, see a compute process has started, which is actually doing the privacy risk assessment in the background. So let's look at the data in the meanwhile. So this is the data set that we uploaded. This is a typical data set, standard data set, um, which has customer ID, mobile number, Aadhaar number, um, and then you have type of account, then zip code, complaints, date of birth, balance. What was the balance on a specific date? Currency, current balance, IFSC code, MACR, pending amount, start date, end date, transaction, and transaction timestamp. Now, a lot of them are very very sensitive. A lot of them are statistical in nature. So the algorithm has to go through the whole data set, understand different kinds of attributes which are present, understand what level of risk they come with, then try to simulate different kinds of privacy attacks on this, try to identify what level of risk are present for different kinds of attacks, what percentage of the data sets can be attacked, and uh, then build a holistic pet recommendation based on all these risks. Then make compliance recommendations for all these risks which are seen in the dataset. Then finally, if there is cross-border transfer, make recommendations for that. So it's a very very intensive um, effort which goes on the compute side with a lot of AI-based proprietary algorithms which we have, privacy algorithms which we have built, and it provides a very comprehensive report in a very short period of time, which can be used by organizations for significantly accelerating their privacy journey. Right. So that's how it starts. What we can do is we can probably let's first see how much time it will take. So it'll take a couple of minutes time. In the meanwhile, are there any questions at this point? We'll be getting the output shortly. So before we get the output, if there are any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer. Okay. Would share some more information then. So let's, there is a question, I believe. Yeah, this is, you can specify the geography, Neelab. So this is in Mumbai. So if you have a customer, US based customer, in East Coast, we can have this data hosted in East Coast, and the whole deployment can be completely owned by the customer. So we can in fact create a virtual private cloud for the customer, and he can completely own it, and he will have complete access to it. And we will even delete the data. We can also delete the data as soon as the processing is complete. So that way, there is no residue of the data. Just have the report, and this can be hosted in the geography of choice of the customer. Yeah, we do, Nitin. We do have a reseller model. So if you are interested, we can have a certainly have a discussion. Please fill the poll, which is coming up shortly, and mention your preferences. We'll be more than happy to collaborate with you. would be no, if there are any other questions, please post. Once the results are available, we will download the results and then we'll go through the results. In the meanwhile, what I would do is I would start one more processing for an anonymous data. Let's see how the results are. So let's take an anonymous data. So there are two ways of giving input, and one is an automated way that you just saw. If a DPO wants to override um, the auto classification and he has some specific business context and he wants to use that context for classification, we provide an option for that as well, where you can provide a privacy assessment um, template where you can mention what is your input and the data set, so that based on that input, um, the data set would be processed. We will look into that, privacy assessment um, data as well. What is considered, what is an input that DPO wants to give, override the auto classification. So that would give a perspective of this manual, or I would say this hybrid classification model, if you want to do it. And we have received two emails. Let's look at those. So privacy X-ray assessment. So one, this is completed, right? So CASA workshop test one that we had done first, it is successfully completed. Now we have the report ready for us. And also the other one is anonymous healthcare data, which we just uploaded for processing. It has just started. So if we look at the back end, we just see that the other one is just completed, right? This is UTC, which is UK time. This is just completed, and this has just started. So we can actually go to the output folder where we would have received see CASA workshop dataset, right? 3 minutes ago, the result has been published here. So we have just downloaded the data. See CASA dataset 346 just now. Let's open the dataset. So this is the report. This is a report which has been created in 5 minutes after going through uh, all the data, simulating different privacy attacks on the data, and generating a single report. Right? CASA dataset 1542, 194, right? And then these are the different things that have been done. It provides a unified privacy X-ray report. It provides an attribute level visualization. It has done singling out simulation, linkage and inference simulation, outlier simulation, and then also done likelihood versus severity matrix. Has built PET recommendations, and also made GDPR, PDP, and SEC recommendations for us, which is very, very interesting. So we'll go through that now. So this is an introduction where it says that if every data you can run it through privacy X-ray and see if the score is less than 20 or greater than 20. So if it is less than 20, you can consider it as non-personal data. And if it is more than 20, then it is considered as personal data, and you can do your data protection impact assessment process on top of it. And in the process, the tool basically gives the risk score and the technical safeguards and measures and mitigations, and then you can bring in the data type, purpose of processing, and what is the business context of collaboration, and what are the data subject rights which apply, and what are the cross-border requirements. So once you provide this, it will become a holistic data protection impact assessment report, which is very, very comprehensive. Right. So this, for this data set, the Pixar score is 100. Um, and the reason for that, let's look at the reason. I think Kapana had told that the font size is small. So hopefully it's visible now. Um, so attribute auto classification. So you can see that there are different kinds of attributes here. Aadhaar has been identified as correctly identified as PII. Mobile number has been identified as PII. Customer is identified as PII. Others, as we saw earlier, others have been identified. All of them have been given a risk score based on uh, the data which it has gone through. Um, the PAs have been given a risk score of 100. Statistical data and statistical numeric have been given a value of 20. Quasi identifier have been given a value of 40. Right? These are different levels of risk. Higher the value, higher the risk. So once it is done, this is the singling out attack risk visualization. Now with PIIs, all columns having PIIs, uh, singling out is very easy because all of them are PIIs. So you can single out almost 100% of the data set, which are like 200, almost 200 rows. So all of them are re-identifiable. It also says that 10 in this case, it provides a description of the scale. 10 is low risk. So this is grouping of attributes. So if you can single out, you can identify a single person, which is one. So one is high risk. So you can almost 100% of the data you can get singled out, right? So that's what it is saying. And this is giving a sample from the data set, right? Customer ID, mobile number, that these are the attributes, and because of these, it becomes singled out. Then it speaks about linkage. Linkage seems to be low because probably the distribution is very decent. Linkage values are from 0 to 1. And given that this value is 0.2, it is somewhere here. That's why you are getting this green color, which is okay uh, compared to typical requirements. So this is well distributed. Then outlier risk, there are not many outliers. Not The frequency is okay as per the default requirements. Similarly, these are also fine as per the default requirements. So this is fine. These are the outliers, some of the outliers. And this is the likelihood versus severity matrix, um, where you can see that the likelihood of re-identifiability and feasibility of re-identifiability is very, very high, because of which the Pixar value is high. And similarly, because of this re-identifiability, the severity is also very high. That's why you have the Pixar is really on the top right corner of 100, which is very, very high. This completes the assessment part of it. Now we get into the technical safeguards. So the risk for the data set was 100. So since it is 100, for linkability, identifiability, deniability, undetectability, these are the Linden requirements. LINDUN. So for undetectability, for all these attributes, what does the risk mean? What kind of remediation you can do, and how is it connected with the regulatory requirement? And these regulatory requirements capture different geographies. Use GDPR, India's draft data protection bill, Linden framework, US NIST, and EDPB, which is European Data Protection Bill's SEC requirements. Right? They capture all this and then say that for these articles, if you do this, it will be mitigated for this level of risk. This is very, very powerful. This is first of its kind that we have seen globally. We have patented this as well. So, this can significantly accelerate your privacy journey. Following this, we also make GDPR and data protection bill recommendations for each of the NIST areas: identify, govern, control, communicate, and protect, right? As we saw earlier. So for example, in identify, you have data flow, inventory mapping, data protection impact assessment, risk assessment. In governance, you have consent management, monitoring and view, awareness and training. So for each level of risk, what are the corresponding mappings and what are the corresponding recommendations for the same, right? All those are captured. For example, consent management. For all data sets, the Pixar score more than 20. Put in place strong policies, process, and procedures for consent-based authorization of data, processing, revocal of authorization, and maintaining of authorizations. And this is as per, Article 7 of GDPR, India's Data Protection Bill, Section 11, Linden 4.9, NIST framework, CTP0. right? So we provide a very detailed explanation of each of the stages and each of the levels. And then finally, if you're doing cross-border transfer, we make recommendations based on the risk score and corresponding categorization as per SEC's cross-border transfer, right? Thus, it provides a very, very comprehensible report about your privacy journey for a specific data flow, right? Any questions till here? Yeah, Isha. Can you please zoom in a bit? I think I did zoom after that. Um, so let's see if the other process for anonymization that we started is complete. See, we received an email that the process complete, right? Upload is complete. So let's go download. This is for the anonymous data set. So while I download this, request you to please take a poll. We have 5 more minutes. Team, can you just put in the poll? This would be, so we have an interesting offer for all of you. Given your interest in privacy enhancing technologies, we would like to offer you 2 weeks of free access to privacy x-ray and also some training as it is needed. If you are a decision maker within your organization for privacy or a practitioner within your organization for privacy, we would be more than happy to offer this 2 weeks access, exclusive access to you. The poll would be just open now. So once you finish the poll, this will have you signed up for this 2 week free access to privacy x-ray. So team, please roll out the poll. Dear audience, now the link for poll 2 is posted. Request you to please go to poll 2 and it has an exclusive offer for you. Please mention if you are interested in doing a POC or if you are interested in getting access for 2 weeks, and we will get in touch with you. This is first of its kind, privacy X-ray, privacy enhancing technology product. Um, so if you are interested, please do mention the same in the poll, in the questions. I am just stopping sharing of the screen for a couple of minutes till the time we complete the poll. We are getting good responses on the poll. Really, thank you so much for people who have filled up the poll. Request others who have not still completed poll 2, request you to please complete the poll. Okay, thank you so much for all the responses. Um, Let me share my screen. Let's quickly look at um, the anonymized report which we had just downloaded. So this is the anonymized report. You can see that for this for healthcare data. We can let's look at the risk score. The risk score is 18.6, which is much less than what is what was what we had earlier or what we typically see in sensitive data. So which is this is inline. There are no PIIs. The quasi identifiers are here. If you can see, even if there are singling out within quasi identifiers, there is no singling out. The data has been properly anonymized and properly aggregated. Um, Linkage is very minimal as well. Outlier is very minimal as well, and hence we have a very low likelihood versus severity matrix here. And the recommendations, pet recommendations, may not be applicable here because the data is already protected. Right. Same with here. The majority of the recommendations may not be required because the data does not fall into personal data category. Hence, none of the regulatory requirements apply on the data, and the data is free for collaboration with parties in the ecosystem. Right. So that's how the product works. This significantly accelerates organizations you know privacy journey, and enables organization to be globally compliant for privacy experiences. Right, thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to drop here. You may be here for next couple of minutes. Feel free to drop me an email. You can reach me on LinkedIn. um, you can search for Abhilash Soundararajan. You would be able to see me on LinkedIn. And similarly, if you want to drop me an email, you can just drop me an email. I'm just trying to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Hope you are able to see my screen. Right? Yeah. You can drop me an email, abhilash@privacysapien.com. Right? Thank you so much for joining. Looking forward to an accelerated privacy journey for all of you. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you for being such a kind audience. Thank you, Neelab. Looking forward to connect. Thank you, Rajesh. Hope it was useful. Hi team, can we move to the backstage?